Life of George Washington. George Washington was born on February 22, 1732. George Washington grew up in Virginia. Washington's father was a farmer. His father died when Washington was only 11 years old. Washington had an older brother named Lawrence. Lawrence took good care of George. Lawrence made sure George was educated. When Washington turned 16, he got a job as a surveyor. A few years later, Washington became a leader with the Virginia militia and became involved with the start of the French and Indian War. After the French and Indian War, Washington married Martha Dandridge Custis. Lawrence died, but he had a huge estate in Mount Vernon. Martha used that estate to raise her 2 children from her previous marriage. George and Martha never had kids of their own. Soon after, Washington was elected to the Virginia legislature. Soon, Washington became mad with unfair treatment by the British rulers. Washington began to argue and fight for their rights. When the British refused, they went to war. Washington was one of Virginia's delegates at the First Continental Congress and also the Second Continental Congress. This group was of representatives from each colony who decided to fight the British together. In May of 1775, they made Washington as the general of the Continental Army. Washington didn't have an easy task, although he held his army together. Washington never gave up. Washington served 2 terms as president, or 8 years. Washington established the rule for future presidents to follow. Washington formed the presidential cabinet, which included Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton. Washington refused to serve 3 terms. He didn't want to rule for too long. A few years after leaving office, Washington died from a throat infection on December 14, 1799.